I've been doing this for 18 years, and so I don't know a lot about a lot of things, but I know a lot about reverse mortgages, retirement, long-term care, the things that happen after we're 62. We don't plan, most people spend more time planning a 1 or 2 week vacation than they do their retirement. And very few people plan for long-term care, even though 50% of us are going to need it at some point before we pass away. And in our family, it was 100% because my mom and dad both needed long-term care before they passed away. And the reverse mortgage was definitely a part of that equation. And this is a way to kind of think ahead and plan ahead and understand as well that sometimes we've got several hundred on these webinars. That's not the case. We got a smaller group today. And so make sure that you type into either the chat box or the Q&As, whatever's easiest for you to find questions, because I don't want this to be something that is, and I already saw, Matt said good morning. So Matt knows how to get into the chat box. So hit the Q&As so we can have a little bit of dialogue. I'm going to go through a lot of the questions, and Mike is going to jump in if he's got some points as well. But the first thing that I want to tell you is that this is something that is different than what you think it is. Most people, unless they've been to one of these specific webinars that Fairway has put on, believes that reverse mortgages are very different than what they are. I read a book a number of years ago called Don't Believe Everything You Think. Seems like a strange book, but we think a lot of things that are wrong, things that are not correct, things that are not really the way that it is. And so I'm going to go through several thought process of kind of the overall view and then kind of narrow it down, but do not hesitate during the process to throw in some questions and in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we cover it. Now, why is it that people don't like reverse mortgages? Why is it that they generally don't recommend them, or they look at them as a loan of last resort? It's because they have a lot of misconceptions that typically are not true. They believe that they lose the house. They believe they're giving the house away, that they hurt the kids, all sorts of things that are really not true, but they believe it because they've heard it at one time or another. And it's not correct, of course, but it is something that is just said over and over enough that it's like, well, that seems like that might be correct when it's not. There's a number of people that have done an extensive amount of research on reverse mortgages and using home equity in retirement. And that research has been overwhelmingly positive. And I've learned from a lot of those people, it's very difficult to find an informed person that does not like reverse mortgages. It's very easy to find an uninformed person that hates reverse mortgages. So it's kind of interesting that those things are together, because when you're uninformed, you can often come to the wrong conclusion. Now, there's 4 things that typically people say is that, well, the bank takes the house. I heard they're expensive. You got to pay all kinds of fees and interest and everything else. My kids will end up with a big problem, and they're risky. They're dangerous. None of those things are true, but people think them. The bank does not take the house. It's simply a mortgage. We give you a mortgage. We give you money, and it's paid back a year after you're dead. So that's a pretty good deal, because most mortgages you have to pay back every month. This is simply a mortgage that's different because you're old enough that you don't have to pay back until a year after you're dead or when you move out of the house. And when you do move out, guess what? You don't have to be responsible for an overage if the houses went down in value. And if it went up in value, as typically happens, your children get the difference. And it's not something that goes back to the bank. We're not in the business of owning houses as a mortgage bank. We are in the business of lending people money and collecting interest, not collecting houses. So that's odd that people think we want your house, because we don't. We just simply want to earn interest on money that we lend you. Now, a lot of people think they're expensive, and they're really not. The interest is 3.5%. It's just as cheap as any other mortgage. They're a little bit more expensive in closing costs, where some people get that because there's mortgage insurance that's paid to the federal government to guarantee that you will never have to move out of your house, even if you live to be 110. That's a pretty good guarantee, and quite frankly, it's worth paying for. And that's the only thing that's different. All other costs are the same. Appraisal, title, anything else that you would do, just refinancing a regular mortgage or purchasing a house. A lot of people think this hurts the kids. And it actually helps the kids. My 4 sons are very happy that I'm going to do a reverse mortgage when I turn 62 in just a couple of years, because they know that I will have more money to enjoy life with their mom. And on top of it, I'll have more money to enjoy life with them and take them on vacations and help out the grandkids and so on, because I'm not stuffing all of my money into my house. It only makes sense. So my kids are actually better off. The only way that my kids will be better off financially is if I die early. If I die early, they will end up with a larger inheritance. Now, if my kids want me to die early so they get a bigger inheritance, I'm going to disinherit them, and you should too. So when people say, well, if you get a reverse mortgage, the kids are going to end up with less. Well, of course they will. If you take money out of your IRA, the kids will end up with less. If you spend the money that you got in savings, the kids will end up with less. So the longer you live, the less money you got to pass on to them because you've used more of it. So the interesting thing is that if you use your equity instead of your cash, the kids will end up with less equity, but more cash, and overall be better off. They are simply not risky and dangerous. You need to understand them, but they're not risky and dangerous because you can't get foreclosed on unless you don't pay your taxes. And you know, if you don't pay your taxes and you don't have a mortgage, that you can lose your house? Same deal. It's no more risk to have a mortgage. In fact, the mortgage gives you an additional layer of protection because it gives you money to pay the taxes. It gives you money to take care of maintenance or insurance or the other things when otherwise that money would not be accessible. Fairway is a leader in this space, and we can go into a lot of details about Fairway, but we have over 600 offices. There's people like Fred anywhere in the country. So if you have a loved one in Connecticut, or you've got somebody in Florida or up in Washington State or over in Florida or whatever, just Fred can put you in touch with anybody anywhere in the country. Fairway is the only company that has a trained reverse mortgage specialist in every single state in the U.S. And we've got, obviously, certainly cover the Valley area and Phoenix, and Scottsdale, Prescott, and all the way up to Flagstaff and down to Tucson. So all over Arizona. Arizona is one of our bigger cities. Now, let's talk about the overview first. This is fascinating. This year, for the first time, and it's a little weird, I'm glad we're not close to dinner yet, but this year, for the first time, there will be more baby diapers sold than, more adult diapers sold than baby diapers for the first time in the history of the country. That is a demographic shift. You've probably never thought about that. That's because there are more people on the right side of the screen than there are on the left side of the screen. Everybody talks about the millennials. There's a whole ton of millennials, all kinds of new babies and everything else. But the majority of people are moving into the baby boomers like me, born between 1946 and 1964, that are moving into retirement at the rate of 10,000 people a day. And we are headed for a much bigger long-term care crisis than what we have now, much bigger. Very significant issue. That big bulge, the rat through the snake, started back in 1946 when my dad came home from the war, married my mom, had my oldest brother Larry, and of course the rest is history. There's a big baby boom that started. Him and a few million other people, of course. So think about what the whole implications are. Half of people don't have any money saved or put aside. About a fourth of the baby boomers are undersaved, and about a fourth are reasonably comfortable. That means there is a huge need for money in that area. And the problem is that most people have saved money in something called equity, an illiquid asset. So for the purpose of our conversation, if you can see the screen, this is equity and this is familiar, that's cash. So this $100 bill, you know exactly what you could do with that. You could take it down, buy a couple tanks of gas, or you could get some groceries with it or whatever. What is this worth? This is a little squeezy $100 bill. Fred will give you one of these if you want one. And it looks like a $100 bill, but it's not. You can't use it. It only represents something. It represents equity. If you have and I want to tell you right now, I'm going to offend some of you, 100% of the equity in your home is worthless. All of it is worthless. There isn't one dime that you can use of your equity unless you convert it to cash. It's worthless. And people get offended when I say that because they say, well, just a second, Arlen, I got $1 million paid off house. I don't know about the other people, but I got $1 million paid off house and it's worth a lot. Your house is worth a lot, but your equity is worthless. Until you turn your equity into cash, until you sell your house. I was just talking to somebody in Montana earlier today, a financial advisor, and they have a client who lives in Scottsdale who needs some money, and they have a $3 million paid off house. And they don't know if they have enough money to go on vacation. Because they got $3 million stuck in their house. It's all equity. And they're living on Social Security primarily. I mean, isn't that kind of silly when you think about it? It's worthless. Their $3 million house is nothing but a cost. It's something they have to pay taxes on, and they have to pay insurance, and they have to pay maintenance, and the HOA fees and all that sort of thing. So it's amazing to me that people don't realize that putting money into a house is really risky and dangerous. Taking money out is safe. It's exactly the opposite of what you think it actually is. So it's very odd that people consistently are kind of looking in the wrong direction. And somebody left that on. I'm going to close my window so it's a little bit quieter. Okay, so sorry about that. Somebody is, I don't know if they're robbing a car or not, but anyway, the bottom line is that with these 10,000 people a day that are hitting 62, 4,000 of them, 40% are still making a mortgage payment. And yes, that's great. Matt said, send me the listing, the $3 million homeowner. Yes, but they want to live in the house. That's a problem. But the guy in Montana said, sell your house down there and you can get a cheaper one up here. So maybe that'll be the next thing. So Matt will keep your contact information and Fred will send that over if they decide to sell their house. So it is fascinating to me that real estate agents, mortgage people, financial planners, all kinds of people are sending money to the house, and they are themselves, and they are chasing millennials as the big market. The big market as old people. Did you know that I went to showings with my kids to buy a house when all of my 4 sons were buying a house? 4 different realtors, and went to look at their house and with them. And do you know that not one realtor asked me a very important question? Are you planning on moving to be by your kids and your grandkids within the next year or so? Not one of them. Not one of them asked me if I would want to go live near my kids and my grandkids. Isn't that an obvious question? Well, I ended up buying a house by my kids and my grandkids, and I didn't talk to any of those realtors. I talked to a realtor that knew was a senior realtor that dealt with people like me that understood reverse mortgages, because that was a realtor that understood my needs, my situation, and where I was going. And do you know that my house is more expensive than all 4 of my kids' house? And my realtor made more than any of the realtors that were selling my kids' houses? They weren't dumb realtors. They weren't bad realtors. They were just chasing the millennials. They weren't thinking about, if you go into Walgreens, you'll see just as much shelf space devoted to adult diapers as to baby diapers. How come we're not doing that in other areas? Why aren't we catering to that big group, that big bulge, this rat through the snake, so to speak, that's on the right side? We have to pay attention to that. That's a demographic shift that people are ignoring. That's going to be going on for the next 20 years. So I want you to understand that that group has put over $7.2 trillion into their homes. Yes, they have money in IRAs and 401ks, but they put $7 trillion into their homes. That's how much equity is sitting in people's homes that is worthless, completely worthless. That's more money than has been put into one market-specific investment than any other country in the world at any other time. $7 trillion in one asset. Other assets, IRAs and 401ks, they're scattered out. Stocks, bonds, REITs, all kinds of different investments, insurance, annuities, whatever. But the particular money that's over $7 trillion, almost 7.2, all of that, 100% of it is stuck as an illiquid asset in people's homes that will never take care of their long-term care needs. It will never help them move up. I was just talking to a financial planner. Their client wants to move up from a $250,000 house to a $500,000 house. And he doesn't want them to pull any money out. So he's telling them they should stay in the old $250,000 house. I said, tell them that they tomorrow can take that $250,000, sell their old house, because all kinds of people want to buy their old house. They can move up to the $450,000 house that they want to buy, not quite 500, and it costs them nothing. In fact, we will come in, Fred will come in with the difference. So they sell their house for $250,000. Fred comes in with another $250,000. They can buy a house up to $300,000 because they put money in the house. So now understand, and Matt kind of alluded to this, real estate is the best and long-lasting investment if used correctly, and it is. I'm a big fan of investing in real estate. Half my net worth is in real estate, but it's not in home equity. I have all the properties leveraged on purpose because I would rather put my money into investments and into liquid assets so I can afford to buy more real estate, or I can afford to buy things, or I can afford to take care of long-term care, whatever the situation is. My mom and dad's house took care of their long-term care. Why is it that I put money into a 401k or an IRA and it's okay to take money out when I need it when I get older? Why can't I put money into a house and take it out when I get older? Because we are taught from the beginning, you take money and you put it in your savings, and when you need it in retirement, you take it out. That's your retirement fund, quote unquote, IRA, 401k, savings account, whatever. So I put cash in and I pull cash out. Very simple. Why is it that when I put money into a house, I only get equity? And I am told that I should leave it there and not touch it and give it to my kids. What if I went to my financial advisor and I said, hey, Mr. Financial Advisor, I gave you some money over the years and I'd like it back. And he'd say, well, Harlan, you shouldn't take it back. That's for your kids. Don't touch that. Leave it there for the kids. And after you die, we'll give it to the kids. How upset would you be at your financial advisor? You said, just a minute, I put that away for retirement. Why can't I have it? How come people put it into the house and they say, well, we can't touch it. We got to give it to their kids. Why don't you give life insurance to the kids? Why don't you give cash to the kids? Maybe you could spend it on them before you die. That's something that's very odd. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before I do, I'm just going to mention briefly that this is a product to give you a kind of an overall understanding. 62 or older, FHA qualified house, got to live in the home as your primary residence. It'll never affect Medicaid or your Social Security, Medicare benefits as long as you're not on Medicaid. If you're on Medicaid, you should still do a reverse mortgage, but that's a different story. We do reverse mortgages for a lot of people that are in long-term care and are on Medicaid to protect the house. So different purposes, but certainly if somebody has run out of all their other money, they should do a reverse mortgage quickly, especially if they need long-term care to protect against the Medicaid or to take care of home care. You keep the title to your home. There are credit and income qualifications because we got to make sure you have the ability to pay for your taxes and insurance. The loan proceeds that you get, some people say, well, how much do I get? I've got a $400,000 house. How much do I get? We give you about half if you're 62. If you're 82, we give you about 70%. So people say, well, that's a ripoff. I've got a $400,000 house and you're only going to give me 200 grand. What happened to the other 200? Still equity. We didn't take it away. It still belongs to you. We just didn't create liquidity. You can't have your cake and eat it too in this case. We'll give you $200,000 in cash. You can still keep the other $200,000 in equity. You still own it. But we're just going to create liquidity for $200,000 without you selling the house. If you want the whole $400,000, you need to sell the house and move out. You can't live there anymore. Then you call your friendly realtor and say, hey, I got to put the house up for sale. And the interesting thing is, when you put the house up for sale and somebody buys it, they usually want you to move out. So you can't live there anymore. With a reverse mortgage, you're guaranteed to live there for the rest of your life, no matter what. That is a very powerful, important thing to know. Reverse mortgages guarantee you, they don't cause you to lose your house. They guarantee that you can stay in the house for the rest of your life, no matter what happens, come hell or high water, increases or decreases in home values, crashes in the stock market, interest rates fluctuating one way or another. You are guaranteed to stay in your house for the rest of your life, no matter what. That is a very important thing when you get older, because you're guaranteed to stay in your house. Now, you don't have to make mortgage payments while it's happening. You can if you want. If you want to make mortgage payments, you can. We'll take them and we'll give the money back to you if you want it, which is a lot better than a forward mortgage. A forward mortgage, you don't have any choice. You have to make the payments and then they stay there and they turn into equity and you can't get at it. When you give us money in a reverse mortgage as an optional payment, we give it back to you whenever you want it. That's a pretty significant deal. That's pretty important. So don't forget that you can make mortgage payments. It's just that most people don't want to make it because there's no required repayment until the last living borrower leaves the house. This is not free money. Some people say, well, you can't be that good. It's money that we're lending to you. It's a mortgage. So we give you $100,000 and we expect to get it back. It's just that we have a very liberal payment plan. The payment plan is it's due after you're dead when you move out of the house. That is really the important thing to understand. Will you pay it back? Yes. But you won't pay it back. Your kids won't pay it back. Your house will pay it back. The equity in your house will pay it back. And you say, well, Harlan, around here, maybe you don't know it up there in Wisconsin, but around here, things didn't go too well back in 2008. And now home values, homes that were worth 400 were all of a sudden only worth 300. Some areas they were only worth 200. It was horrible. So guess what? Nobody that had a reverse mortgage got hurt because they continued to get their checks. If they were taking the money out, their credit line was still in place. No mortgage was called. They were able to stay there as long as they wanted. And if they walked out because they had to move somewhere else or they died, they were not liable for the difference if they were upside down. So if home values go up, a lot of people bought during that time, and now that $200,000 house is worth $500,000 or whatever because they bought it out of foreclosure, whatever the deal was, and now it just kept going up, and now there was more value. Well, that's a pretty big deal because now you're in a situation where if there's more value there and you pass away or you want to move, the money belongs to you, not to the bank. So if your house is worth 500 and you owe us 200 at the end, your kids get 300 and we only get 200. So we don't get the house, which is a huge mistake and miscommunication that's given over and over. So you can't owe more than the home value, but if there is money left, if it's good, the money goes to your kids or goes to you if you're still alive, of course. Now, from a purchase standpoint, this is a big deal, especially for real estate agents. And that is a scenario where you are able to sell that existing house. So let's say you've got somebody that's got a 2-story house or they've got a house that's on multiple levels and it doesn't make sense for them to live there anymore. Okay. So in that situation, they can sell their old house. This is what's going on that we just talked about this morning with a financial planner and and the realtor and the client. As we said, hey, you can sell this house for $250,000. The realtor said it'll sell right away. And we want to buy a house in this other neighborhood that's kind of a senior neighborhood where it makes more sense. All the houses are on one level and it just fits in with what we want to, where we want to retire. There's obviously a lot of those types of neighborhoods in the valley. But that's going to cost more because it's new and it's no maintenance. Okay. So when that happened, we will take that $250,000, put it into as a down payment on the next house, and they can get up to a $500,000 house because we'll come in with the other $250,000. So we've got a whole nother webinar that we teach for realtors specifically on reverse for purchase. And that's not the subject of this webinar because we're hitting all the general areas. But for some of you that are interested in purchasing a house or in the real estate business specifically, we can either send you a recording of that webinar or invite you to the next live one, which is coming up next month. Okay, so now let's take a look at this whole picture. How does reverse mortgages work? Remember, I compared it to an investment. So what do I do with an IRA? I put money in, I'm 20 and I'm 30 and 40. I deduct money from my check and I send money in every month for the investment for the future. Now, what happens then when I get older? Well, I go to my financial advisor and say, I need some money back. Maybe I want to annuitize it and I want to check for $800 a month or whatever. I put money into the Social Security system. I take money out when I get older. Now, the house is the same way. All a reverse mortgage is, let's just oversimplify this. People say, they're too complicated and I don't trust them. Well, guess what? It's really simple. We have a magic wand and we bring out that magic wand and we say, okay, you have put $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 into this house and you've got a whole boatload of equity. What we'll do is we'll wave the magic wand and we will turn that equity into cash. It's really that simple. Now, this may seem a little bit hokey that, is it really that simple? Yeah, it is. Because you put money in, it's your money. Why can't you get it back out? Because it's equity and equity is not worth anything. Nobody will take a picture of your $1 million house and you go down there and say, see my $1 million house? I've got a whole bunch of equity in it. And so I want to buy a tank of gas. They'll say, well, hey, we take cash or credit card. I don't know about your $1 million house. That is so important to understand that a reverse mortgage does nothing more than take a portion of your equity, not all of it, takes a portion of your equity and converts it into cash so you can actually use it to have a better retirement, to take care of long-term care issues, to be able to enjoy life more, take more vacations, help out the grandkids, whatever. And that allows you to turn that into cash without having to move. And if you do want to move, you can move up into a nicer house and buy a more expensive house because of the difference. Maybe in a safer neighborhood, a nicer neighborhood, an area that a house that fits your needs better from a health perspective. So how does that work? Option one is a lump sum. If you're going to do a purchase or a refinance of your existing house, that is a lump sum. Put money into the house, pull money out. Okay. And so in a purchase, I take that money, I put it in to the down payment, and then we take a lump sum of the other $250,000 out, and I own a $500,000 house, put down $250,000, and I'm done making payments. What if I just want to stay in my house and I need long-term care costs, or I need, maybe my husband died and I'm the wife, the widow that's left over, and I need some income because I used to rely on my husband's pension or whatever. And so that's a big problem, because widows live an average of 7 to 9 years longer than their husbands. And I just ran into a lady last year in Phoenix, Scottsdale. She was living in a $600,000 home paid off, and she didn't have enough money to go out to lunch with her girlfriends. Sad situation. They were millionaires when they retired, put cash into the house, spent the other money on a lot of care, and here she was with nothing in her investments at all. So we set up a line of credit so she was able to access that without having to move. Some people could say, well, she should sell her house and downsize. Some people want to, but she happened to like the neighborhood. She had a lot of friends, family that cared for her and everything else. She wanted to stay there. The third way to get money is that we wave the magic wand on and say, okay, we'll give you X number of dollars a month, $800 a month, $2,000 a month, whatever, depending upon the value of your house and your age and how long you want the money. Now, you can also mesh or merge any of these three things. So maybe you have a $600,000 house and you still owe $100,000 on it. Well, you can use a lump sum to pay off the existing mortgage, which is one of the best uses, by the way, of a reverse mortgage. Pay off your existing mortgage. I've got a very important question to ask you. Why would you want to continue to make a payment on your house when you don't have to anymore when you turn 62? What is the purpose of making a mortgage payment if you don't have to? If you got a letter on your 62nd birthday and it said, congratulations, you now are over 62 and you have 50% equity in your house, you no longer have to make payments. Would you continue to send a payment if you didn't have to? If the letter said you can pay it once a month, you can pay it once a year, or you can pay it a year after you're dead. It's up to you. Wow. I'm going to take that into my financial advisor and say, is this for real? Yeah, you can pay that at the end. You can pay the interest and the principal at the end so that you can keep your other money in other areas. So paying off an existing mortgage is a powerful thing to do. So I might say, okay, I've got this $600,000 house I want to pay off. I'm going to take a lump sum out to pay off my existing mortgage because I don't want to pay it anymore. And then I'm going to take out another $100,000 in a line of credit because I might need that money in the future. I might want to use it for fun stuff, or I might want to use it to go on vacation with the kids, or I might want to use it to fix the roof or whatever. And then I've got $100,000 left because remember, I'm eligible for 50% of it. So then I take another $100,000 and I turn that into a annuity payment of $800 a month for life. And I get that for the next 20, 30 years, no matter how long I live in the house. I keep getting that check deposited into my account, just like a Social Security check. So I can do a combination of all three of those. So remember that if you put money into your house, there's nothing wrong with pulling it back out. Just like you put money into an IRA, there's nothing wrong with pulling it back out. Why should it be different? Let's look at this in a graphic form. Everybody who has wealth has 3 buckets of wealth. Everybody that owns a house has 3 buckets of wealth. So bucket number 1 is your ability to make money, W-2 wages, commissions, pensions, Social Securities after you retire, whatever. And all of that money goes up to your top rectangle, your top wallet, your wallet that is being used heavily from the time you're 18 to 61, and most of it is evaporating right off the top. And you spend it on things like food and clothes and transportation and so on. But you try to save 5, 10, 15, 20%, and you dump it into bucket 2. That's the financial planner's bucket. And you try to put away a little bit each month, each year, whatever the situation is, and you try to put it there as a nest egg for the future, money that you do not need to spend today, that does not evaporate off the top, and it doesn't stay in your wallet. You invest it, and you save it for the future. And people try to save 5, 10%. Most people don't save much more than 10%. What about bucket 3? That's our bucket at Fairway. That's the mortgage bucket. That's the house bucket. We require people to pay a pretty good portion of their income every single month into bucket 3. 20, 30% sometimes as high as 40% of somebody's income goes into bucket 3. That's a lot of money. That's millions, billions, trillions. That's why there's $7 trillion in bucket 3, because we force you to put it there every single month. Now, you get something out of that. You get a place to live. So that's pretty significant. But you're putting a lot of money there that is not just interest, and it's not just a place to live. You're putting money away there in the form of equity. a lot of it. So now let's fast forward. You're 62 and we're down here in the bottom retirement wallet. And the wallet's getting a little bit thinner. And there's not as much money coming in from bucket one because you're not working anymore, or you're working less, or you're kind of winding down a little bit. Maybe you've retired. Maybe you've been downsized. Maybe you lost your job in COVID. And all of a sudden, there's not much coming in from bucket one anymore. And you're only getting Social Security. The vast majority of people in this country live on Social Security once they get past 62, and supplement it with bucket two. And so then you go to your financial planner and say, hey, I need a little extra money. Well, just a minute. Why can't we go to bucket three? Remember, we put hundreds of thousands of dollars into bucket three, hundreds of thousands. Why can't we access that? You can, now that you know about a reverse mortgage, you can access it. So what you can do is we bring the magic wand. Fred comes over, takes care of that, waves the magic wand after you sign your name about 100 times on an FHA mortgage, and we release a certain amount of money, either monthly, in a line of credit, or in a lump sum, depending upon how you need it. And that money makes all of the money in bucket two last longer and keep you in a better retirement for a longer period of time. You will die with less equity, but more cash. And people say, well, just a minute, isn't that a bad thing? Because I was always told to pay off my house and it was supposed to be free and clear. I've heard that hundreds of times, hundreds of times. I want to pay off my house, leave it free and clear, and give it to my kids. Let's think about that for a minute. Does that really make sense? Real estate's a good investment, so it's a good thing to leave to the kids, but it's not the best thing to leave to the kids. The best thing to leave to the kids is bucket two. The best thing, and there's overwhelming research, and there has been books written on the subject by researchers that are a whole lot smarter than me, PhDs, CFAs. Wade Pfau is one of them, a friend of mine that did a whole ton of research and does seminars and webinars and certifications for financial planners on this whole thing. So when we go over all of this stuff, guess what? He said that if, you can read the whole book, but I can summarize it. If you do a reverse mortgage at 62, instead of waiting until you're broke at 82 or 92 or never doing it at all, three things will happen. Number one, you will have more cash flow. Well, obviously, you're not making a mortgage payment. So that's pretty obvious. Number two, you will pay less in taxes. All of the money coming out of bucket three is tax-free. You don't pay taxes on the income that comes from bucket three. You don't have to pull money out of bucket two and pay taxes so you can make a payment on bucket three on your house. You don't have to pull money out of your investments in order to put money into bucket three. And then the third thing, and maybe the most important thing, is not only will you have more cash flow while you're alive, and not only will you end up paying less in taxes, but you will also end up with a higher net worth and thus a larger legacy to pass on to your kids. Less equity, you won't have as much equity because you're going to be spending it, but more cash. What's wrong with that? Nothing. But culturally, and what we're used to in this country is we pay off our mortgage and we give it to our kids. Our kids don't want the house. What do? I'm sure that any of the realtors on this webinar will say they sell it as fast as they can. They drive us nuts. They call us every day trying to get this thing sold, and nobody wants to do it. And there's infighting amongst the kids and everything else, and it's a pain. Well, if there's a plan put together, it just works a lot smoother. And some places work a lot smoother than that. But the goal, the kids don't want the house. They're not going to move in. I've got 4 kids. I mean, when I die, are they all going to roll up in the house with a U-Haul truck and unload their wives and their dogs and their kids and come into my house and live there? No, they're going to sell it and split it up 4 ways. They're not interested in my house. They're interested in the money, not because they're greedy kids, but because they don't need the house. If it was given to them, they don't want it because they're not going to move in because they already have their own house. By the time I'm 90 and they're 60, I hope they have their own house. I mean, my goodness, I sent them to realtors in their 20s to go buy a house. They shouldn't need my house when they're 60. So, and if I want to give them money and if they need money, I'll give it to them while I'm alive. If it's money I don't need, I'm giving it to them while I'm alive. I'm not going to wait until I'm 90 and they're 60. I mean, it's really silly the way we think about this in this country. And you wonder, well, why are you going through this whole psychological thing for such a long time during this webinar? Because if you don't understand this, none of the rest of it will make sense. Because you'll just say, well, oh, no, I don't want to reverse mortgage. I want to give my house to my kids. No, you want to give money to your kids. You don't want to give your house to your kids. There's a big difference. And so when you're doing your retirement planning and you're trying to figure out what to do, then you do it this way. And guess what? If I put my line of credit in place like I did for my mom and dad in their 70s, by the time they got to their 80s, they were able to use that money for long-term care so they could stay at home instead of being shipped off to the nursing home. I've never met anybody that said, I'd like to spend the last, I don't know, couple, 3 years of my life in a nursing home. I just think that'd be cool, especially during COVID times. I mean, that's crazy. I'm not making fun of that, but I'm telling you that my mom and dad really wanted to be at home when mom had Alzheimer's and dad's stroke. It made a lot more sense for them to be at home and have home care. And we paid $8,000 a month for home care out of guess where? Bucket 3. And we didn't pay any taxes on the money that we pulled out. Long-term care is one of the most important things that people don't plan for. And all of a sudden, boom, there it is. We need long-term care. What do we do now? And the kids are scrambling and trying to figure things out. And then guess what? Along comes Mike trying to figure out, we want to take care of you, but it costs money. In order to send people over to your house, we need some money. And the money's all there, sitting in bucket 3 in the form of equity. And remember, it's worthless. So why would we not use our home to stay at home? That's one of the brochures that we have from the American Council on Aging is specifically use your home to stay at home. When you put money there, what's it for? It's for you to use. Whether you put money in savings or whether you put money in your house, either way, it's there. It's kind of like that funny scene in Arrested Development where they stored money in the banana stand. And the dad was in prison and said, there's always money in the banana stand. And he said, the kids thought they wanted him to sell bananas. No, there was money lining the walls of the banana stand. There's money lining the walls of your home and it's worthless. It's not accomplishing anything. There's money in your house, but it's not usable money. It's like it's locked up in a glass case and you look at it and you talk about it and you brag about it. People come up to me at birthday parties and weddings and they elbow me and they say, we don't need you guys anymore. We're all done with mortgages. We got our house paid off. It's free and clear. And I always say the same thing. I'm sorry to hear that. Not because I'm being sarcastic, but because I'm sorry to hear that you've taken 100, 200,000, a million, whatever, and you put it all into equity and there's nothing you can do with it. You can never take your kids on vacation. You can never do anything fun. It's just stuck there. That doesn't make sense, but people do it all the time. So to finish up, I got about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure that I've got some time for questions and that you guys throw some things out. But to finish up, I want to tell you a little story about Avon Skin So Soft. And you say, whoa, this is getting kind of weird. Now this guy's going to start selling Avon. No, I'm not an Avon guy. My sister was, but I'm not an Avon guy. So I'm not going to sell you any Avon, but I'm going to tell you a story about Avon Skin So Soft. Now, you guys don't have mosquitoes down there in Arizona, but we got a lot of them up here in Wisconsin. And it's really crummy during the summer when we can be outside because it's nice weather that we got a bunch of mosquitoes. Have I ever used bath oil? No, I would not buy bath oil. I mean, after I get a shower, why would I spray the oil back on? I mean, I took a shower to get the oil off. Why am I putting bath oil on? So I'm not interested in bath oil at all, but we buy this stuff by the boxes because it works great as an insect repellent. Avon didn't really plan on that, but something in here keeps the mosquitoes away. Now, what's interesting is I ran into some people a number of years ago and they said, oh my goodness, do you think you're smart because Avon Skin So Soft works on mosquito repellent? You have no idea. And they directed me to a website. And the name of the website is 81 Uses for Avon Skin So Soft. And there's all kinds of things you can do with it. I mean, it cleans ink off from your skin. It removes soap scum from shower doors. It kills ants. You can spray it on rose bushes to keep the deer from eating them. It's a great insect repellent for your pet. Takes fleas off from dogs. Keeps flies off from horses. I mean, that's crazy. So why am I talking about this? What does this have to do with what you are spending your valuable time? Because I want you to understand that a reverse mortgage has a whole bunch of uses, a whole bunch of uses. It's not just for an 86-year-old widow who's broke. Can we help an 86-year-old widow that's broke, that's living in a $600,000 home in Scottsdale? Of course we can. But we should have used the reverse mortgage 20 years ago when they were millionaires, maybe to save taxes, to keep the money in the nest egg longer. Now she's in a situation where they've never even bought long-term care insurance. And so part of our plan was to make sure that she had long-term care because she needs somebody right now, a couple hours a day. And so those are things that we can make plans for now because we can activate that money. But what else can we do with the Avon Skin So Soft analogy? Well, there's certainly a wide variety of things. We can save money on taxes. We can use the money for vacations. We can use the money to help the kids. In fact, if you think about it just as the old days, it was a loan of last resort. It's for people that are broke, for people that are in some sort of financial distress that didn't plan well. Well, if you use it as part of your overall plan, it's a whole different thing. In fact, we use it for planning from a financial planning perspective. People that use it, instead of using it as ignoring home equity or using it as a last resort, are the worst off. Their money doesn't last as long. If you're doing it in conjunction with a stock portfolio, we spend a lot of time on this with financial advisors in teaching them from that perspective. Now, the fact is that you can use it to refinance a regular mortgage, so you can make your mortgage payment optional. People say, well, I can afford it. It's only $954. It's no big deal. It's not $954. On a 30-year mortgage, it's $343,000. And yeah, rates are lower now. Even at 3%, it's over $300,000. So it's not just $950 a month. It's $300,000 that's being moved from bucket 2 to bucket 3, or from bucket 1 to bucket 3. Why? What's the purpose of doing that? Long-term care is a huge deal. Long-term care insurance, or taking care of long-term care itself. Cost of long-term care, you guys know all about that. That's certainly something that Mike works on regularly. What about life insurance? Maybe you want to leave a legacy, a larger legacy for your church or your family. You can do that. Instead of paying off your house, you can buy life insurance and leave behind a very substantial inheritance where you want it to go, of what you want to leave beyond. I'm not saying that everybody on here should buy life insurance, but that's simply an example from there. The Medicare gap, 62 to 65. What do you do when you retire at 62? Are you just going to pay COBRA when you've got that scenario in between? What happens if you think that maybe values are going to go down in the future? Hurry up and get your money out of the house. You get a guaranteed future value no matter what happens to the value of your house. So this is not the loan of last resort. It can definitely enhance your retirement, creates liquidity, and most importantly of all, if you get the reverse mortgage loan now, the line of credit will grow and you'll be prepared down the road for, guess what? Long-term care, fun stuff, surprises, whatever comes along. Now, here's going back to the Avon Skin So Soft thing and the different uses. We have people that refinance their standard mortgage. We have people that use it for portfolio protection, big wealthier people that have a lot of money in stocks, bonds, everything else. They pull money out of their reverse so they don't have to pull money out of anywhere else. Replaces the need for a cash reserve bucket because the money's always sitting there. You can keep all of your other money invested. Helps you purchase any needed insurance or investment products that you want to make sure you have long-term care insurance, make sure that you have life insurance, make sure that you've got an annuity and use the money for other things. And then purchasing, some people want to get an investment property or a second home. People up here in Wisconsin want to buy homes down by you guys because it happens to be a lot warmer there in the winter. When we get 20 below in the winter, it's a lot warmer in Phoenix. So many people will pull money out of their house in Wisconsin and buy a property in Florida or Texas or Arizona. It's a potential hedge, and people in Arizona want to buy a second home up here so they can cool off in the winter or in the summer. It's a potential hedge against future declines. I tell people all the time, the only thing certain about your future is that it's uncertain. Let me repeat that again. The only thing certain about your future is that it's uncertain. Who could have ever guessed? If you would have watched a movie of 2020, think back to let's say on New Year's Eve, you were watching a movie. And on that movie, they were showing pictures of people all over the place walking around with masks on, into grocery stores and into restaurants, and they all had masks on. And you saw in that movie that they had sports being played in empty stadiums. Would you have, you said, that's not even a realistic movie. That's weird. You wouldn't have even believed what happened in 2020. Seeing a complete, nobody flying, nobody staying in hotels. You would say, well, no, that's unrealistic. That would never happen. Well, it did. So 3 million people all of a sudden out of work that are over the age of 62. Our demographic was hit the hardest. Nursing homes, and obviously those that were older were the most at risk. So there's all kinds of uncertainties there. So whether it's bridging that Medicare back, whether it's a potential hedge against future declines that you don't know what's going to happen, gifting to your family, gifting to nonprofits, a church, a synagogue, whatever the situation is, why not put to work that worthless equity in your house?